it is true in a deep sense that everything we do matters. The language we use with each other, who cares for the children and who doesn't, who washes the dishes and who doesn't, it just, it is, each thing is a building block, and I can only tell you how much fun it is when you figure that out, I mean, I remember when people first started to ask me for an autograph, I used to say no because it's a non-democratic institution. I felt like a jerk, and then I realized to them I was just saying no. All right. So I thought, okay, how can we change this institution? So now I try to get each person to whom I give an autograph to give me their autograph. And they kind of smile. I mean, it's the idea that we've made something equal out of an old institution, no matter how tiny it is.
I just want to add something I remember just talking to Gloria in the last 2 days, which I want to share with all of you. I was telling her, I said, I'm a journalist. I love reading books. I like to be on the other side, so I don't know how to deal with all this attention that I've been getting. And, sometimes people are coming to take Gloria's autograph and also taking my autograph. And I keep telling them, go take hers. And they say, no, we want yours. So I was saying that I'm just getting tired, and I'm not used to this limelight. And what do I do? So she said, but remember that when someone is coming and talking to you, that might be the only opportunity for human contact that you have with that person. So just share the moment. And that's what I wanted to share with you.
And again, I like the way that this has moved, because it's gone off from the streets and from picketing governments and asking for the laws to be changed to really looking at the importance of small things, the way you live your daily lives. I was wondering whether you'd address something a little darker, though, which is there's a sense in the US as well among young women, among women in India here, that they're fighting the same battles over and over again. A year before the Delhi rape protests happened, there was a wave of protests in Haryana and in Uttar Pradesh. And when I went out to see some of them, they exceeded all my expectations. One, by being very joyous. People said that anyway what had happened was dark and terrible. There was no need to add to it. They'd give you cheese and a spoon and say, beat on it and please raise your voice up, because the change that we want is not going to be a sad change. We're not fighting for an unhappy world, But the second thing that I heard often was 20 years ago, we didn't do anything, We didn't do enough to change things, and now our daughters are going through the same problems that we face. And a tremendous anger about the fact that it should be this way, that you're fighting the abortion debate all over again in the United States, that in India, again, things seem to come back in cyclical form. And is that really a defeatist way of looking at it? Are we missing a lot of the good news?
Well, I do agree that we need to celebrate the good news and have joy in our lives, as I was saying, but we also need to recognize that what we're talking about is deep. I mean, if you don't have democratic families, then you put up with lack of democracy outside the family. If you look at the question of violence against women, you understand, or against females altogether, you understand that it's all about controlling reproduction. I mean, if you tell a lie and say that half the human race is superior to the other human half, you've told a lie, and the only way to maintain a lie is violence or the threat of violence. And we have, in my country, we have enormous problems of domestic abuse. The most statistically dangerous place for an American woman is in her own home, not in the street. It's also true that 1 out of 5 or so women on campuses has experienced sexual assault or attempted sexual assault. None of us is alone in this problem. And it is long and it is deep. So our Native Americans, who were matrilineal for the most part and profoundly democratic, indeed the source of democracy, always said, okay, you may choose to be violent because you have to, but you must always remember that every act of violence takes 4 generations to heal. So, I think that helps us be in it for the long term and also be cautious and thoughtful about what it is we do to each other. And I'm sure there are thousands of people right now in the United States saying, oh, we're fighting the abortion battle over again. But why are we fighting it over again? One, we've won the majority public opinion. Two, we've won the law for the most part. And three, the United States in very short time is going to cease being a majority European American or white country. And there's still racism, a lot of racism, and the people who are somehow psychologically dependent on thinking we have to be a white country, consciously or unconsciously, are just in a fervor of backlash and worry. And that's why the same groups are against undocumented immigration or against immigration altogether. They're against contraception and safe and legal abortion because they say white women are, the white race is committing suicide, we're having too few children. You know, it's insane because it seems to me great that we're going to look more like the world. but they've been raised in an entirely different way. So if we're feeling, I would say if we're feeling profoundly impatient, we maybe should look and see why there is the depth of resistance.
And again, that leads me to a parallel question for Ruchira, which is something that you talk about, democracy in the family, that being so important. And again, you work with and you meet people who come obviously from environments where it is assumed that the family will be violent, it is assumed that the streets and the officials you're dealing with will be violent. But if you had to imagine a pattern for a really democratic family, what would that be? What have you seen in your work?
Well, I guess men would play a bigger role in child rearing and women would play a bigger role in public life. So they would have more decision-making powers. They would be doing things outside the home, just as men would be doing more things inside the home. And, sometimes I joked, I think Kamla Bhasin was once asking, what does evolution mean to you? Where do you see the future? And I said, maybe breastfeeding men. Because I think that would just change how they think about children, about how they think about the world. And we really need a rethinking on the cult of masculinity, where men are being forced to be something they are not, be inhuman to be masculine. And that's sort of a contradiction in terms. And so the family starts it all, because inside the family you're told that don't cry, you're a boy, or sit with your legs together because you're a girl, don't laugh so loudly because you're going to get married and go away.
Yeah, I love your idea that gender is something that we learn. It's not something that you're born with. But this is a good time to open it up to the audience, actually, because I've seen a lot of faces. There's a hand up right there. And I have a lot of other questions, but I really think that I should shut up now and let you do the talking and the hard work. So if anyone else has a question, just put your hand up and let the ladies who are handling the mic know so that they can come to you. Thanks.
Hello, ma'am. Actually, I'm a student from Presidency, so actually I'm working in various foundations, creative writing at that, but the thing is I've always been interested in NGOs. So just today morning I was asking my father that what if I volunteer at an organization like Apne Aap, rescuing red light area women and all that. So given that he knows how tenacious I am, he went on mumbling something like there's stigma attached with it, how will the society look at you and that, which was a clear indication that of saying no to me actually. So he's okay with me being an IS officer, a wannabe IS officer actually, but he's not okay with me working or volunteering for red light area women. So that's that.
Oh, thanks. You're asking how to handle that, and that's a very interesting question.
Do it anyway. No, it's not your father's fault. He wasn't born, he didn't create this system. He's reflecting the values around him. So I'm being facetious when I say do it anyway, because I would probably try harder to explain and make a human connection with somebody, father or not father. But do it anyway. in the end, if whether or not it meets with approval. And the reason I say that is because if you don't, you will haunt yourself with what if. You know, there's no matter how hard it is, the still worst thing for me in my life is not doing it. Because if I don't do it, I walk around forever thinking, what if I had? What would have happened?
There's a lot of hands there, so we'll go around. Could I ask you just to keep your questions reasonably brief, just so that we can take as many as possible? Thanks so much. Do you need a mic? One sec.
Thank you. Hi. I haven't read a lot about feminism, but one of the most impactful books I read last year was Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. And it was so much about inequality at one of the last places you'd expect it to be, professional places of work. And in the years since then, there have been several instances of brute violence and crude violence at the workplace, especially in India. You know, there's been the case of the woman in Tehelka who was, you know, we all know the story. We know about the intern who was harassed by her mentor. What is your, you know, what is your take on how women should deal with this battle? You know, where everything is supposedly equal, but actually far from it.
Well, what you read in Sheryl Sandberg's book, I think, is a very important step because she is, the best thing about that book, I think, she was recommending that women create their own support groups within the workplace structure and meet regularly and support each other. So, you know, I think that's the most important thing about it. What's interesting, too, is the degree of criticism she got for the book because she was too powerful. Okay, when was the last time a powerful guy was criticized for writing an advice book? I mean, you know, so I think just take from it that which is useful, and to me, the group example was the most useful. I know her quite well. She's a wonderful human being. She's very fair and generous and you know, good as an employer as well as an employee. But she only came to this a few years ago, too. You know, the reason, we have the Women's Media Center, which you can find online, in which we critique the media and train people for the media and so on. And she came to speak to us and she realized, because we had invited her, and this was only about 5 years ago, she realized that she had put in her date book the Fortune Women's Power Conference or whatever as the Fortune Conference. She'd left out the word women. And she realized what that meant, you know, because she is so often the only woman. And she, you know, she's come to it with great fervor, and I think that she's doing a lot of very important work. It may feel really distant, you know, from the situations of life and death, dire assault and beatings and so on that all of our countries are dealing with, not just India, in many different ways. But it's her belief, and I think she's right, that it takes an understanding woman or man in power to create a safe workplace. I mean, she was at Google, she was, you know, and they created a safe campus. They allowed men and women to bring their kids. They, you know, so one person in a decision-making spot may be able to create safer and more humane conditions for people who don't have that much power.
But that's one of the things that astonishes me, actually, that, you know, women have so little of the power, but they make so much of the impact. And I had a question a little later about both of you about how you get around to imagining equality. But Ruchira.
I just wanted to add that, it's so important just to speak up. And in the Tehelka case, the fact that intern spoke up, the fact that Tarun's daughter spoke up, it creates its backlash. But in the long run, it's having an impact on all our consciousness that this should not happen. And the consciousness of women and men, because other men are also thinking about this. So speaking up makes a difference too.
Yeah.
And people do it in the most extraordinary ways. I remember sitting in a hearing in the U.S. Senate, and there was a right-wing guy who was just being atrocious, and his daughter was sitting with us, and she was very shy. And about every 5 or 10 minutes, she used to get up, go to him on this big platform, and whisper in his ear, "You make me ashamed." And it had an impact.
That's a lovely story. And the lady with the mic.
Ma'am, I just want to ask, how do we change the psychology of men? Because that is the root cause, not only men and women, because that is the root cause where the entire stuff begins, be it Western, be it India, anywhere. We have to take steps to actually, from the very childhood, learning of a child, to reform the society in that line, where the steps are not being taken.
I don't know whether you noticed, but all the men in the audience had this collective little, head duck.
Well, first of all, you can't read our minds, right? We owe you the honor of telling you the truth. And we often don't do that. What movie do you want to see? Oh, I don't know. What movie do you want to see? We know perfectly well which movie we want. From that to very much bigger things. But of course, so we can change along the way. The great thing about human beings is that we are infinitely changeable. That's what allows the species to survive, actually, that we're adaptable. Of course, the place of maximum influence is when you're a child in the family, and if you see violence, you think it's normal or inevitable. If you see dominance, you think there's no way out. If you see a cold, distant guy, you may marry a cold, distant guy because you don't know that there are nicer guys. And the other thing is, I think we have to understand that this is profoundly, deeply in everybody's interest. The masculine role is a prison for men. It kills men earlier in the States, in the absence of things that attributed to masculinity. Guys would have 8 more years to live. This is not bad. It limits what you want to do. Suppose you want to do something that's not considered manly. It endangers you because it's masculinity that is used to persuade you to go to war, even if it's not nowhere near your own interest. So I try always to understand, to think what helped me as a white person to understand that I was imprisoned by racism in my country. And, when I came home from living in India for 2 years, I looked around and I thought, I could go snowblind here. Why am I only in these white groups? I got mad on my own behalf. So I became a much better ally, and I think men become allies when men see their stake in a full humanity, a longer life, closeness to your children, if you want to have children, doing what your talent speaks to you about, what you want to do, not what is masculine.
And also, as young women, I think we have to have the courage to not send confusing signals. And we have to be very truthful and honest about what we communicate and what we say. And sometimes it's really uncomfortable, sometimes it's really difficult. But every time we say something which we don't want to say, which we are just saying it for the approval of the nearest man, we actually build his expectation and keep building it till the time he begins to believe that's normal. So we should not even start to build an expectation. Right in the beginning, if we don't agree with something, we don't want something, we have to say it.
Sorry, we'll come back Because there's a lot of hands up in front. Just a second, who's got the mic? Okay, after you, could you pass it to the lady out there and then the lady in the black?
Okay, can you hear?
Yeah, and do you think we should take 3 questions together and then see whether we can answer them? Would that be all right? Yeah.
Okay. The question here is that in our society, what we are seeing among women is a subconscious, if not subliminal, treatment of idolizing Savitri and Sati, where we are trained from childhood to put ourselves on the back burner. All our needs are subject to our family, whether they're daughters or whatever. We have to cater to them first. This transcends all aspects of our domain, be it women's health, education. We are taking a second seat. Now how, because of Savitri and Sati, who are imbibed in our religion, in our upbringing, in the way we are trained, this is the typical woman you should idolize and become. Even though it's not said to us as a democratic feminist mother, she will never say that, but it comes through the mythologies we hear as a child.
Actually, let's keep the mic, here. I think that's an important question to answer because it's not just, one religion or one culture. This seems to be prevalent in all cultures. And one of the things I used to wonder as a child was,